All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into a text that claims to reveal the secrets behind the Bible.
Oh, juicy.
It is the Book of Jubilees,
Okay.
sometimes called Little Genesis.
Little Genesis. Interesting.
And we're going to be exploring excerpts from a YouTube video,
Okay.
provocatively titled Forbidden Knowledge, Why Book of Jubilees Was Banned.
Ooh, very catchy.
I know, right?
Mm.
Now you might be wondering,
Yeah, why?
why a book that expands on the Bible would be considered forbidden?
Right.
That's
No.
exactly what we're here to uncover.
I'm ready.
Get ready to explore what this book says, why it was rejected, and most importantly, what you can take away from its fascinating perspective.
It's a journey through time and theology, for sure.
Yes, with a healthy dose of cosmic mystery.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Jubilees jumps right in, retelling the creation story from Genesis.
Right. So far, so good.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
It claims that God didn't just create the world, he established the very structure of time itself.
Whoa, hold on.
A cosmic calendar,
That's a big claim.
overseen by angels,
Okay.
that governs the cycles of the entire universe.
So it's like a master schedule for everything.
You got it.
Wow.
And what's fascinating is that Jubilees proposes a very specific calendar,
Okay, lay it on me.
a solar calendar of 364 days.
Oh, interesting. So no more leap years.
No more leap years, ensuring perfect seasons and lining everything perfectly.
That's pretty efficient.
So no more wondering if the holidays are on the right date.
That is convenient. But I have to ask, why would this calendar be so important?
Well, in Jubilees, it's not just about convenience. It's about aligning human life with divine order.
Ah, I see. So this solar calendar represents a perfect cosmic rhythm.
Exactly. And the implication is that following anything other than this divinely ordained calendar, well,
What? It leads to problems.
it leads to spiritual disorder.
Ooh, that's heavy stuff. Wait, are we saying that using the wrong calendar can actually mess with your spiritual well-being?
That's what Jubilees seems to suggest. Is that why it was banned? Too radical a concept of time for folks back then.
You know, it's certainly possible. Remember, Jubilees was written during a time of intense debate about calendars.
Right. Different groups advocating for different systems.
Exactly. Different groups advocated for lunar or solar systems, but Jubilees takes it a step further,
Yeah.
making the calendar a matter of cosmic, even spiritual significance.
Now, that's a bold statement.
Yeah, very bold.
And speaking of bold statements, let's talk about the role of angels in Jubilees.
Okay, let's do it.
They're not just sitting around playing harps.
Right.
They're active participants in the creation and governance of the entire universe.
So they're busy.
They are very, very busy.
Wow, so they're like cosmic administrators, keeping everything running smoothly.
Precisely.
The book even says angels ensure the sun, moon, and stars follow their divinely ordained paths. We're talking universal scale here.
Universal scale and the significance of this angelic involvement goes even deeper.
How so?
It elevates the importance of God's law, making it an intrinsic part of the heavenly order.
Okay, so the laws themselves are built into the fabric of creation.
Exactly. It's not just God saying, here are the rules. It's
Right.
more like these are the laws of the universe, the blueprint for creation. But how do the familiar Bible stories we know fit into all of this?
Well, Jubilees retells many of the key stories from Genesis,
Okay.
but with added details and a particular emphasis that supports its central themes: divine order and the consequences of straying from that order.
All right, so let's start with Adam and Eve.
Okay?
Jubilees emphasizes God giving Adam commandments right from the start, not just suggestions, but actual rules to live by,
Right.
reinforcing this idea that divine law is fundamental, built into the very fabric of creation.
Okay, makes sense.
Then there's Cain and Abel.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Cain's murder is a major breach of that divine law, a disruption of that order, but the righteous line continues through Seth.
So even with disobedience and disruption, God's plan keeps moving forward.
Exactly. What about Noah? Where does he fit in?
Well, Jubilees focuses on the covenant after the flood,
Oh.
highlighting the importance of purity and righteousness for preventing future judgment. It's like God is giving humanity another chance,
Right.
emphasizing the need to live in accordance with his divine order.
It's like he's laying down the law, so to speak, right from the start.
Yes, setting the ground rules for this new beginning.
But what about Abraham? He's considered the father of faith in both Judaism and Christianity.
Right, a pivotal figure.
How does Jubilees portray him?
It paints a more rebellious picture than Genesis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, Abraham grew up in a family of idol worshippers.
Right. And there's that striking anecdote of Abraham smashing his father's idols as a young man. Talk about a dramatic rejection of family tradition.
It's more than just teenage rebellion, though.
Okay, so what does that tell us?
It's a symbolic act, showing Abraham actively choosing the one true God and rejecting the paganism that surrounds him. But here's another key difference. Jubilees claims Abraham observed the Sabbath and other laws long before Moses.
Oh, wow.
Suggesting they were always part of God's covenant.
So the seeds of the Mosaic law were planted way back with the patriarchs.
Precisely. It's not just a new set of rules with Moses, but a continuation of an ancient tradition.
Which makes that whole chosen people thing a lot more complex.
It adds a whole new layer to the story, that's for sure.
Speaking of laws,
Yeah.
let's talk about the covenant of circumcision.
Okay.
Jubilees doesn't just see it as a sign for Abraham's descendants.
Yeah.
It claims it was a divine law from the moment of creation.
Wow. So not just a ritual, but a fundamental law of the universe.
That's what Jubilees is saying.
Yeah.
It elevates circumcision to a cosmic law, a way of aligning oneself with the universe's order.
It's not just about Abraham and his family then. It's about connecting to the very structure of creation.
Okay, that's a whole new level of meaning for something I always thought was just a religious ritual.
It definitely adds a deeper layer of significance.
And then there's the binding of Isaac.
One of the most intense stories in the Bible.
Jubilees adds a fascinating detail here.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The angel Masta, who's associated with Satan,
Right.
suggests the test to God.
Ooh, so it's not just God testing Abraham.
It's not just about testing Abraham's faith, but portraying a cosmic battle between good and evil.
With Masta tempting Abraham to defy God's command.
Talk about high stakes. And it seems like this cosmic battle continues through the generations.
Well, Jubilees frames the birth of Jacob and Esau as more than just sibling rivalry. It's part of a cosmic design.
So it's not just a family drama.
It's not just about who gets the birthright.
It's a microcosm of the larger spiritual conflict playing out on a universal scale.
Exactly. Jacob is predestined to inherit the blessing and continue the line of righteousness,
And Esau.
while Esau represents rebellion against God's plan.
And that conflict intensifies with the birth of Jacob's 12 sons.
The 12 tribes of Israel.
Jubilees claims the order and timing of their births were preordained by God, with each son playing a specific role in God's plan.
So the 12 tribes weren't just a family, but part of God's plan for the entire world.
According to Jubilees, yes, their very existence was a key point in this cosmic timeline.
A step towards fulfilling God's grand design.
Okay, so we're starting to see how Jubilees weaves this grand narrative, connecting seemingly ordinary events to a larger cosmic plan.
It's all part of a bigger picture.
But where does Joseph fit into all of this?
Joseph's story is crucial because it sets the stage for the Exodus.
Right, the escape from Egypt.
And Jubilees frames his brother's betrayal as a cosmic transgression.
So their jealousy and cruelty weren't just a family squabble,
It was much more than that.
a serious disruption of the divine order.
And their actions have serious consequences.
Jubilees even claims their sin was recorded on the heavenly tablets,
Oh, wow.
and that their descendants would suffer as a result.
So it's not just a personal failing.
It's a ripple effect that impacts generations to come.
Exactly. Their actions set in motion the events leading to Israel's enslavement and eventual deliverance.
But it's all part of the grand design.
Even the difficult parts.
So even betrayal and suffering are part of God's plan. That's a pretty intense concept to grapple with.
It is, but it's a theme that runs throughout Jubilees.
But Jubilees doesn't stop there.
What else does it say?
It also claims that Joseph's rise to power in Egypt was preordained,
Meaning it was destined to happen.
meant to prepare the way for the Exodus.
It wasn't just luck or skill that brought Joseph to that position.
It was all part of a bigger plan.
Jubilees presents his life as a cosmic event, fulfilling God's plan.
And of course, Jubilees adds angels, guiding and protecting Joseph along the way,
Of course. Making sure he stays on the path to fulfilling his destiny.
which further emphasizes that his path wasn't just good fortune.
It was divinely orchestrated.
So Joseph was put in place to save Israel from famine, but their time in Egypt ultimately leads to enslavement. And according to Jubilees, that was preordained too.
So it's like one event leads to another, all according to God's plan.
Israel's enslavement wasn't just a historical event, but a necessary trial
Like a refining fire.
to prepare them for receiving God's law and reaching their ultimate destiny.
It's like the universe itself is working to shape them into the people they're meant to be.
And then, of course, we have the Exodus itself.
The dramatic escape from Egypt.
Jubilees portrays the plagues as symbolic acts.
Not just natural disasters.
Not just natural disasters, but a direct defeat of Egypt's gods and the spiritual forces behind them.
It's like a cosmic showdown between different powers.
It wasn't just about freeing Israel.
It had a deeper meaning.
It was about demonstrating the superiority of the God of Israel over all other powers.
A powerful message for sure.
So finally, we reach the giving of the law at Sinai.
The Ten Commandments and all that.
And surprise, surprise.
What?
Jubilees claims these laws already existed on the heavenly tablets all along.
So Moses wasn't creating new laws.
He was simply receiving them, revealing what was always true.
And these laws apply to everyone, not just Israel.
Because they are the universal laws woven into the fabric of creation.
Which brings us back to that idea of a universal cosmic law that governs everything.
And Jubilees insists that the patriarchs observed these laws long before Moses,
That's interesting.
which paints a very different picture of early biblical history than we might be used to.
It challenges the traditional view of how God's law was revealed.
So it's not a progressive revelation of the law, but a timeless truth that has always existed.
Which brings us back to the cosmic calendar.
Jubilees really emphasizes its importance for aligning with the divine rhythm of the universe.
So it's not just about getting the dates right, it's about living in harmony with the very heartbeat of creation.
What happens if you don't follow this divinely ordained calendar?
I'm a little afraid to ask.
Well, Jubilee suggests that straying from this calendar, from this cosmic rhythm, leads to spiritual disorder,
Like a cosmic misalignment.
a disharmony within yourself and with the universe itself.
That's a pretty big consequence for using the wrong calendar.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. A cosmic calendar, angels running the show, and divine laws that predate Moses. It's a mind-blowing perspective on biblical history.
It's a lot to take in.
But where does it all lead? What does Jubilee say about the end times?
Now that's a topic for another day.
We'll have to save that for our next deep dive into the Book of Jubilees.
I can't wait to see what other secrets this book holds.
So stay tuned, folks. This cosmic journey is just getting started. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Book of Jubilees. Before we dig deeper, let's recap where we left off.
Okay.
Jubilees presents this grand cosmic view of history, right?
Right. With angels, calendars, laws. It's a lot.
We've got angels running the show, the divinely ordained calendar, and laws woven into the fabric of creation itself.
Okay.
But we're still trying to figure out
why
this book was ultimately rejected by mainstream Christianity.
It's a head scratcher for sure.
It's time to put on our detective hats and examine the evidence.
I'm ready to solve this mystery.
Okay, so the first clue lies in the historical context.
Okay, the historical context.
Remember, Jubilees wasn't written in a vacuum.
Right, there's always a backstory.
It emerged during a period of intense upheaval and change.
Within Judaism.
Within Judaism.
Okay.
New ideas were bubbling up. Different sects were vying for influence.
Right.
And there was a lot of debate about what it meant to be truly faithful to God's covenant.
So a time of a lot of change.
A time of transition and turmoil.
Okay.
So Jubilees was part of a much larger conversation, a struggle to define the very essence of Judaism.
So Jubilees was kind of like a voice in the crowd.
It was one voice among many, trying to make sense of things.
And some of the ideas presented in Jubilees, they were considered pretty radical.
They were pushing the boundary
of what was considered acceptable.
within mainstream Jewish thought.
Like that strict solar calendar.
The calendar.
Yeah.
It seemed pretty adamant that this was the calendar to follow.
Precisely. The solar calendar proposed by Jubilees, well, it clashed with the lunar calendar.
Which was gaining popularity at the time.
Which was gaining dominance in Jewish practice at the time. And remember, Jubilees didn't just present it as a preference.
Right.
It framed it as a divine mandate.
Essential for aligning oneself with God's cosmic order.
So following the wrong calendar.
It wasn't just a matter of getting the dates wrong.
It was a spiritual transgression.
No wonder it ruffled some feathers.
Imagine trying to convince people to completely change their understanding of time.
And religious practice. It would definitely create some tension.
Big time.
Okay, so the calendar controversy might have played a role.
Okay.
But what about those other unique aspects of Jubilees?
Okay, like what?
Like the expanded role of angels.
Right, the angels are everywhere in Jubilees.
And the claim that the patriarchs followed the Mosaic law long before Moses.
Okay, so those two things.
Did those ideas also contribute to his rejection?
Well, Jubilees presents a highly developed angelology. Angels are everywhere in Jubilees.
They're running the show.
playing a central role in creation, upholding God's laws,
Right.
even influencing events throughout history.
It's almost like they're the unseen force behind everything that happens.
But wouldn't that have clashed with evolving ideas
About God.
about the nature of God
The angel.
and the role of angels in the divine plan?
I mean, wouldn't that be a problem?
Absolutely. Some early Christian thinkers might have seen Jubilees' focus on angels as detracting
Retracting from God.
from the supreme authority and power of God.
Shifting the balance of power, so to speak.
Exactly.
And what about that claim?
About the patriarchs
Yeah.
following the Mosaic law.
That they already followed the Mosaic law.
Wouldn't that have been a pretty radical idea?
It seems like it, right?
It definitely challenged the prevailing understanding.
Of how God's law was revealed.
The traditional view was a progressive revelation,
Right. Step by step.
with the law being given in stages.
But Jubilees flips the script,
In what way?
arguing that the law was present from the very beginning.
So Moses wasn't bringing something new to the table.
He was reaffirming what was always true.
That's a pretty bold reinterpretation of biblical history.
It really is. So we've got a few potential reasons here.
Oh, okay, like what?
The calendar controversy,
Right.
the intricate angelology,
Okay.
and the reinterpretation of early biblical history.
Yeah, those are big ones.
Is there any direct evidence that these factors led to Jubilees' rejection?
Unfortunately, there's no official decree saying, we hereby ban the Book of Jubilees.
So bad.
But we do find some interesting hints from early Christian writers.
Give us the inside scoop.
What did they have to say?
Yeah.
Some early Christian writers criticized Jubilees.
For its Jewishness.
They took issue with its strong emphasis on circumcision and other Jewish laws.
Which makes sense.
Right. In what way?
Considering that Christianity was in the process of defining itself as distinct from Judaism,
Right. It was a time of figuring out their own beliefs and practices.
it was a time of forming their own identity.
Exactly.
Early Christians were wrestling with their relationship to the Jewish tradition.
And books like Jubilees,
Yeah.
which emphasize Jewish practices and laws, well, they might have been seen as a threat.
A threat to Christianity.
This emerging Christian identity.
An obstacle on their path to establishing their own beliefs.
It's possible.
So it was a matter of theology
Uh-huh.
and identity politics.
A delicate balancing act in those early days.
It really was.
Early Christians were trying to figure out what it meant to be followers of Jesus,
Yeah.
and they were drawing boundaries
Between themselves and other groups.
between themselves and other groups, including other Jewish sects.
So Jubilees might have gotten caught in the crossfire of this identity struggle.
It's a possibility.
Okay, we're starting to understand why Jubilees might have been seen as problematic.
Okay.
But what about its absence from the biblical canon?
Yeah, how did it end up on the outside looking in?
That's a big one.
That's a complex question, and it involves a lot of historical and theological debate.
But in essence, the process of deciding which books were considered authoritative scripture,
The canon.
the canon,
Right.
was a gradual one,
It wasn't an overnight decision.
and often influenced by factors beyond just theology.
So it wasn't simply a matter of whether a book was considered true or inspired.
There are other things going on.
There were power dynamics, politics, and influence at play.
So Jubilees might have been excluded simply because it didn't align with the prevailing theological or political climate of the time.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
It just didn't quite fit in.
Exactly.
And it's important to remember that Jubilees wasn't the only book that was left out.
There were others.
There were many other early Jewish and Christian writings that didn't make it into the final cut.
So it wasn't singled out.
So what happened to Jubilees? Did it just disappear completely?
Not entirely. While it was excluded from most Christian Bibles,
Okay.
it was preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
Oh.
They actually consider it to be part of their canon,
So it survived.
in a corner of the Christian world.
Even though it was largely forgotten elsewhere.
It's like a hidden treasure waiting to be rediscovered.
And in recent centuries, scholars have rediscovered Jubilees
Really?
and have begun to recognize its historical and theological significance.
It's like getting a glimpse into a lost world.
A different way of understanding the Bible and its origins.
So even though it's not in most Bibles today,
It still has something to teach us
about what?
about the development of early Jewish and Christian thought.
Absolutely. Jubilees offers a unique perspective on Second Temple Judaism,
Right.
and it sheds light on the diversity of beliefs and practices that existed during that era.
And it serves as a reminder
Of what?
that the biblical canon isn't a monolithic, unchanging entity.
It's not set in stone,
It's the product of historical and theological processes.
which are still debated even today.
It's like peeling back the layers of history,
Yeah.
revealing the complexity and the human element behind what we often take for granted.
As a single, unified book.
Right.
But let's bring this back to the present.
Why should we, as modern readers, care about a book that was written centuries ago
Yeah, why should we care?
and wasn't included in the Bible?
Good question.
What's the takeaway for us today?
That's a good question. I think there are several key takeaways from our exploration of Jubilees.
Okay, lay it on us.
What can we learn from this ancient text?
Yeah.
First, Jubilees reminds us that the Bible isn't a monolithic entity.
It's not just one book with one perspective.
It's a collection of diverse texts that reflect a variety of perspectives.
And theological viewpoints.
Exactly.
Even though Jubilees isn't in the canon,
You're right.
it can still deepen our understanding of the biblical world.
And the development of religious thought.
Exactly.
It offers a unique lens through which to view familiar stories
Right.
and prompts us to think critically
Critically about what?
about the assumptions.
The assumptions we bring to our reading of the Bible.
Precisely.
It challenges us to question what we think we know.
And to consider other interpretations.
Other valid interpretations.
It's easy to forget that the Bible we have today is the result of a long and complex process.
Of interpretation and selection.
Exactly.
And Jubilees reminds us that there were other voices
Other perspectives.
that were part of that conversation.
Even if they weren't ultimately included in the final version.
It's a reminder that the history of religious thought
Yeah.
is full of diverse interpretations.
Man, sometimes conflicting ideas.
Okay, so Jubilees helps us see the Bible in a new light.
What else?
Second, Jubilees highlights the importance of context
Context.
when interpreting religious texts.
So we can't just read the Bible in a vacuum.
We need to consider the historical, cultural,
And theological factors.
that shape the writing of the text.
So we need to become historians,
And archaeologists,
digging into the past.
to understand the world in which these texts were written.
Exactly. We need to consider the debates that were happening, and social forces at play.
And the cultural assumptions of the time.
Jubilees was written in a specific historical context.
Its ideas need to be understood within that context.
And that's true for all biblical texts.
They were written in specific times and places.
They addressed specific issues and concerns.
Okay, so context is key.
Absolutely.
What's the third takeaway?
Third, Jubilees challenges us to wrestle with some pretty complex theological questions.
Like what?
Like the nature of God,
Right.
the role of angels, the purpose and meaning of the law, the relationship between free will and divine sovereignty.
Big questions.
Exactly.
Jubilees presents a particular view of these issues. And even if we don't agree with its conclusions,
It forces us to confront our own beliefs and assumptions,
it's an invitation to think deeply about our faith
to wrestle with those big questions.
that have challenged thinkers for centuries.
Precisely. It's not a book that provides easy answers
But it can spark important conversations.
and lead to a deeper understanding of our own beliefs.
So even though Jubilees was rejected by mainstream Christianity,
It still has something valuable to offer us today.
what is that?
It's a reminder that the search for truth is ongoing and that there's always more to learn,
From ancient texts,
even from texts that have been marginalized or forgotten,
it's a reminder that we should never stop asking questions
challenging our assumptions.
and seeking a deeper understanding of the texts that have shaped our world.
And with that,
We're going to delve into the fascinating details
of what?
of Jubilee's vision of the end times
Okay, the end times.
and explore what it might mean for us today. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Book of Jubilees. We've explored its unique perspective on biblical history, its emphasis on divine order, and the reasons why it might have been rejected by mainstream Christianity. But before we wrap up our exploration, I'm really curious about one thing you mentioned, that Jubilees has this intense vision of the end times. Can you tell us more about what it says?
Well, it shares some similarities with the Book of Revelation.
Like what?
A final judgment, a separation of the righteous and the wicked,
Okay.
and the establishment of a messianic kingdom.
Okay, sounds familiar.
But Jubilees presents it all within this grand cosmic narrative we've been discussing.
So it's not just about individual souls being saved or condemned.
Yeah.
It's about restoring balance to the entire universe.
Right.
Bringing everything back into alignment with that divine order.
Exactly. Remember that cosmic calendar we talked about?
Yeah, the one that's so important.
And the idea that God's laws are woven into the very fabric of creation.
Right, right.
Well, in Jubilee's view, the end times represent the culmination of God's grand plan. It's about setting everything right, restoring harmony to the cosmos.
That's a pretty epic vision. But it makes me wonder, if Jubilees is so focused on divine order and following God's law, why is there so much chaos and suffering throughout history? I mean, we see wars, famines, betrayals. It doesn't exactly scream divine order.
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of one of the biggest theological dilemmas.
Which is?
If God is all-powerful and all-good, why is there so much suffering in the world?
Right, the age-old question.
Jubilee suggests that suffering is often a consequence of human disobedience, a deviation from God's laws.
So when humans mess up, it throws the whole cosmic system out of whack.
Precisely.
Kind of like a ripple effect.
Jubilees emphasizes that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves,
But for everyone?
but for the world around us.
Remember the story of Joseph's brothers selling him into slavery?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Jubilees states that their sin was recorded on the heavenly tablets,
Ooh.
and their descendants suffered as a result.
So it's like a generational curse, almost.
It's a powerful reminder that our choices matter.
Yeah.
That we're not just isolated individuals,
Right.
but part of a larger web of interconnectedness.
And this connects to Jubilee's emphasis on repentance and atonement.
So it's not just about punishment, but about restoring our relationship with God
By turning away from sin,
and striving to live in accordance with His will.
it's about finding our way back to that divine order.
So there's hope for setting things right,
Absolutely.
so getting back on track.
Jubilee's vision of the end times is ultimately one of hope and restoration.
Okay.
It envisions a time when God's kingdom will be fully established on earth, righteousness will prevail,
Right.
and the universe will be in perfect harmony with God's will.
That's a beautiful and inspiring vision.
It is.
But it raises another question for me. If Jubilees is so focused on divine order and God's predetermined plan, does it leave any room for free will? If everything is already laid out, do our choices really matter?
That's a question that has puzzled theologians for centuries.
I bet.
Jubilees doesn't offer a simple answer,
Okay.
but it seems to suggest that both divine sovereignty and human responsibility are at play.
It's a tricky balance.
It's a delicate balance.
So it's a paradox.
Yeah.
God has a plan, but we still have choices to make.
Choices that have real consequences.
Exactly. We are active participants in this cosmic drama, not just passive bystanders. Our choices matter, even within the context of God's grand design. And that's a pretty empowering thought, don't you think?
It is. It reminds us that we have a role to play in shaping the world around us.
In bringing about that ultimate restoration and harmony.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today,
From the creation of the universe to the end of time.
all through the lens of this fascinating and often overlooked book,
It's been a fascinating journey exploring the intricate details of Jubilees.
and grappling with its challenging ideas.
Absolutely.
Before we go, what final thoughts would you leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway from our exploration of Jubilees is this.
Okay, tell us.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, and to explore different perspectives.
Right.
The world of faith and scripture is vast and complex, and there's always more to discover.
Jubilees may not be in most Bibles, but it reminds us that there are other voices, other interpretations, other ways of understanding the stories and teachings that have shaped our world.
It encourages us to delve deeper
To dig beneath the surface.
and to engage in a lifelong process of seeking, questioning, and growing in our understanding.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the mysteries of Jubilees and to continue your own explorations of the biblical world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep seeking knowledge and asking those big questions.